Hello, we're Erasmus students from Germany. I'm Franzi, I'm studying at the University of Erfurt.
And my name is Vicky and I study at the University in Bochum.
We're currently studying at the University Pablo de Olavide in Seville, Spain.
And we have the lecture Introduction to Sociology, which is lectured by Maria José del Pino Espejo.
And today we're presenting to you the French sociologist David Émile Durkheim.
Okay, so as you can see on the picture, this was David Émile Durkheim, but he's more known only as Émile Durkheim. He was a French social scientist and was born in 1858 in France. He died because he was emotionally devastated and had a stroke where he collapsed and died in 1917. He left behind his wife Louise and his daughter. His son died 2 years earlier on the war front of the Balkan, and Durkheim never really recovered from the loss of his son, which was also an impact why he was so emotionally devastated. Emil Durkheim was born into a Jewish family, and his father was a rabbi. He wanted him to follow in his footsteps, but Durkheim had a different direction. He preferred to search and wanted to be a sociologist. And when his father died in his 20s, in Durkheim's 20s, it was a kind of relief because he was not under pressure anymore to become something he doesn't want. But on the other hand, it was also very hard for Durkheim because he thought that he has to support his family financially. Durkheim studied philosophy, sociology, and pedagogics at the university in France, and he became the first professor ever in sociology and has thus laid a milestone with that. After that, he taught sociology and pedagogics at the university in Bordeaux. Durkheim was 2 years in Germany and had the opportunity to taught there in Berlin and Leipzig, and he was familiar with English, German, Italian besides French, and he reviewed paperworks from other academics, and he also was very impressed by the work from a German sociologist named Wilhelm Wundt. And Durkheim believed that the relationship between sacred symbols and what they represent must be discovered. During Durkheim's life ruled the French government, and this time was marked by the industrialization, where many companies established, and within that the capitalism was there. The economy increased, and as well as they established a professional civil service. Yeah, so I think that was a quite tough time for Durkheim to live during that time and to become something what he wanted, like a sociologist. But there were so many impacts during this time, which made it even harder. What do you think, Franzi?
Yeah, I think, or as I said, there are so many like obstacles during his life, and also I think because you mentioned there was like a hard time for him when his father died, and I think like it was for him like he was really stuck in between two decisions. On the one hand, he had like this wish to become a sociologist, to really do research on it, to also like create something bigger, to create his own work. But on the other hand, he also suffered from really bad depression because of his father's death, and of course he had to provide for his family. So, and he was only like 20 years old, or what did you say, like during his 20s. So I think like this is like a major obstacle for such a young man to provide the money for his family, to support the family financially, but also at the same time study and create something on your own and go your own path, despite what your family originally wanted for you. Because, as you said, his father was a rabbi, and I don't know, I can imagine it was really hard for Durkheim, because he kind of like ignored his father's will, even though like his father was already dead. And like sometimes you can say, okay, or he also could have said, okay, now my father's dead, I'm fulfilling him the wish to also become a rabbi. But of course it wasn't his destiny, and I think it was actually really brave. Or what do you think?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I would totally agree to that he was a very brave man.
And also, with the first chair in sociology, it's like a real like establishment for the field of sociology, don't you think?
Yes.
Because it was the first chair, or
it was the first chair ever of sociology. So yeah, he laid a milestone.
Yeah, definitely.
As I said. Right.
And also, for the acknowledgement of like sociology as a distinct field, because I think like before he established like the first chair, there were only chairs for philosophy or education, or like,
but not sociology
as like a distinct field.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So after or Vicky presented to you some important milestones and important steps of his life. Now I'm coming to the method. To Durkheim's sociological methods. Okay, you have to cut us some slack. The word sociology and sociological is kind of hard for us, so I hope you don't be too hard on ourselves. So before I come to his methods, I present his bibliography, so his most important works. So, of course, Durkheim published a lot of essays and comments throughout his life, and as Vicky said, he also reviewed the work of other sociologists and other philosophers. However, he was and still is most famous for his books, or for his own published books. And one of his most famous works are the Division of Labor, which he published in 1893, and the Rules of Sociological Method, that was published 2 years later. And with his book, The Suicide, in 1897, Durkheim dealt with suicide from a very atypical point of view, especially if you keep society at that time in mind. But Vicky and I will go more into detail later on. The Elementary Forms of Religious Life in 1912 showed Durkheim's very advanced sociological thinking, as he saw religion not as a set of beliefs, but instead he analyzed social forces and causes that were already presented in a social milieu, and therefore led to the emergence of religious life. His last work was published after his death in 1938, and it was the Pedagogical Evolution in France. So now I will introduce you to two of Durkheim's books or theories. Of course, as I said, he has created more famous sociological theories, but due to lack of time, I have only a very limited amount of time, I will focus only on the two most important theories. And first, I come to the so-called theory about the division of social labor. He wrote his book in order to explain and do research on the change in society. Because while he was writing his work, or the book Division of Labor, as Vicky already presented to you, the age of industrialization was taking place. And that meant there were a lot of social, political, and economic changes, and in the course of that, a very changed society. So, for example, capitalism increased, or the idea of capitalism emerged at all. As Vicky said, I mean, you said like many companies established themselves and many workers, and also the economy increased, and many people, for example, moved from the countryside to the city side, and for the first time there was something, there was a completely new societal shift. So yeah, there were a lot of changes. And Durkheim began to explain this theory by distinguishing two different types of solidarity. And the first type was the so-called mechanical solidarity. And according to Durkheim, this could be found primarily in the so-called pre-modern societies, for example, in an indigenous tribe. And this mechanical solidarity is mostly characterized by a very strong group integration, which means that the individual is actually really linked to the social order and acts in the interest of the society. And this is mainly due to the great similarity of the same values, such as the same religion or the same customs. Because the modern societies had fewer influences from outside, and according to Durkheim, there were usually only a few values and norms which were strongly represented, and therefore the society was more united. And furthermore, Durkheim made the distinction between two types of law systems, or also penalty systems. And the pre-modern societies were characterized by a penal law, which had a rather repressive character. So it actually aimed at punish people if they did not have, for example, the same faith or did not follow the rules and norms. And it was less aimed at actually reintegrating the people back into society. And last but not least, the most important thing was that there was only a little division of labor, because of course there did not exist as many different tasks as nowadays. There were, for example, all hunting or gathering, and there were just not so many different jobs or tasks. And all this led to a very strong so-called collective conscience, which means very strong beliefs and norms shared in common by members of a society. And on the other hand, we have the organic solidarity, which is found in advanced societies, as Durkheim called it. So in our modern societies, of course, he wrote it in the industrialization period, which was for him the most modern society at that time. And the organic solidarity is characterized by a rather weak group integration, because the individuals actually concentrate more on each other, or more on their own individual purpose and own individual goals, rather than on the society as a whole. And of course, society has become more advanced and complex, and the division of labor therefore has increased. There are more different tasks, jobs, and also the law changed. So instead of a penal law, there exists now a restitutive law, which aims at integrating the people back into society instead of only punishing them. But the result of the society is a weaker collective conscience.
Sorry if I interrupt you.
Oh, no worries. I mean,
but just for a second, and to be clear, is it possible to skip back?
I think. Oh no, it's not.
Okay. Yeah, I just have a question about the reintegration. Like, do you have an example for that? Because
you mean like the restitutive
right,
law,
yeah,
and the penal law, or like the more repressive law character?
Yeah, because for me it's a little bit hard to understand. Maybe like yeah, just to be clear.
Just to be clear, yeah. So I only lived in Germany my whole life, or of course I traveled to some other places, but I didn't experience their law system. Luckily, I didn't. But in Germany, I would say we have a rather reintegrated law system, so a rather restitutive law. So, for example, like our I mean, you also know like our highest penalty, or for those who don't come from Germany, our highest penalty is 25 years.
Right,
So
yeah.
no matter what you did, or for example, you murder someone, and the highest amount of penalty you can get is 25 years. So, for example, you get arrested at 25, you have 25 years in prison, and after that, you can still be free again, or can still reintegrate into society. Of course, there are some special cases where it's like really, really dangerous to let the prisoner outside. So there's like some kind of safety guarantee or like safety measures, and if you get that, you will probably never get out of prison, because it's just like for society it's more safe, etc. But this is only, I think, like in very rare cases.
Yeah, so only the law says
Only
25 years, but
so
more.
so it actually aims really at integrating people back. So we don't want to give someone like a whole life in prison, because, for example, if you compare to the US, they have sometimes like 190 years of sentence.
Oh, that's insane.
Yeah, that's insane. And I mean, it's like impossible to fulfill, because no one like turns 200 years old. So I think like German law is more at reintegrating the people back in society, to actually change their behavior, change their pattern of behavior, and not only at punishing them and giving them penalty, you did something wrong, but really they have to think about their about what they did and change their behavior. So you understand what I mean?
Yeah, no, I think I got the point clearer now. And also, I think it might be very hard for someone who was in prison to be reintegrated into society.
Absolutely, you have a really good point there. Yeah,
you have like, if you tell somebody why you were away for so many years, I think it's very hard for other people
course.
to
And sometimes
understand.
you lose all your friends, because I mean, there are a lot of people who don't want to keep contact with a prisoner, or like, okay, and I mean, sometimes for good reasons, of course, but you get out there, you have no family, you have no friends, you often have no money, so it's really hard at like getting a job. And of course, so many agencies and companies don't want someone in their company who was in prison before. Of course. But yeah, I mean, so I hope you got it right now, but we can like talk about this later on, because first I want to present to you like the rest of his theory of the division of social labor. So, as I said, in pre-modern societies, there's a rather weaker collective conscience, and this state of weaker conscience, called Durkheim anomie. So in this anomie, society is actually changing so rapidly that rules and norms cannot be established quickly enough to create a sense of collective conscience. But however, despite this like huge lack of collective conscience, individuals need to rely more on each other. So it's kind of a paradox, like in this modern societies. And he also called the change from the pre-modern to the modern societies the paradoxon, because like in pre-modern societies, the people become more and more individualized due to the industrialization. There are more or many different tasks, many little tasks to fulfill one big task or fulfill one complete task. But at the same time, the people are also more dependent on each other. And he said that the reason for that is division of labor. So division of labor makes individuals more specialized, but division of labor also makes individuals more reliant on each other. So it's kind of like a paradox. And so yeah, now that I came to an end, what I want to ask you, Vicky, or of course also our viewers and most important our listeners, think, so what do you think, can the theory of division of labor still be applied to our world nowadays, or can you find some references like in our society nowadays of the division of labor, of Durkheim's method, and why not? So
yeah, maybe we can give our listeners a few seconds to think about that.
Yeah, sure.
And after that, I will answer the question or what I think about that. Okay, so I personally think that the division of labor still exists today, like in our homes and in the schools, and of course in the government. I think there's almost no area of human activity where the division of labor does not play a role.
Do you think there's also like this paradox that even though people are more like individualized, they need to rely like more on each other? Because, for example, when I read the theory, I kind of sort of thought of Corona or the Corona pandemic or COVID crisis. That even though people, I mean, we're really like individualized, we're only at our homes, we're only and of course also in economic terms, because we had home office, etc., blah blah, we were like really like living for our own and only living for our own goals, and like didn't act so much for society, you know. But at the same time we rely so much on others and rely so much on like society, especially when you think like how alone we would be if we wouldn't have like other people in our lives. So it's also like this paradox. And I don't know, because I don't know, I had to think of COVID as an example.
Yeah, I can agree to that. For example, even though we had technical, like so many technical
like devices,
right,
or
yeah,
like apps and stuff,
and we had Zoom conversations with our friends. We had so many impacts on social media, a lot of challenges to do and funny things. But even we had the opportunity to see our friends and family via a camera on the laptop. It was still very hard. And for example, for myself, sometimes I felt lonely even I was talking to my friends on the laptop, because
it's just not the same.
Yeah, it's not like you. It's different to talk to each other face to face than in front of a computer. And also the physical touch, like only a hug. Or
just like a tight
small
hug.
Small touches are very
important.
Yes.
And it also is like, of course, like Durkheim, he saw it more in like in economic terms, or the division of labor, and this like paradox of like collective conscious. He applied it more on industrialization, therefore in an economic way. But I think you can still apply it to like society in general, not only in economical terms, because I mean like society in general, that's what sociology is for. Because I feel like even though we have all this, like nowadays everyone can like be whatever they want. You have social media, you have or like we in our Western world, of course you have to say that, or in the global North at least, or most of the time, you have access to resources. You can, I don't know, be on social media. You can actually like fulfill your dream way or more easily than it was, for example, for Durkheim back then. But at the same time, because we are so focused on our individual goal, and only like society is so fast moving and changes so rapidly, I think like the state of enemy actually recurs more often than we think. Because I often feel like lost in this world, you know what I mean? When you feel like, I don't know, you cannot adapt too quickly, or cannot adapt quickly enough to the changes, and also like trends in social media. I mean, one trend is like for 1 week and then the other trend, and you just started to adapt yourself to the first one, and now there's just a second one. So I think even though it's more individualized, because people can do whatever they want, people need each other, people need to support each other, or I don't know, I just had to think like of this example.
Yeah, it's That's a good example, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. And society or social media is very fast, and yeah, it changes so rapidly, and sometimes it can get very overwhelming.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, I wanted to add another example for that. For example, in a car manufacturing company, the people today are able to produce more goods and services than ever before. And I think this is also one of the division of labor.
One feature is like,
because if the person before you didn't did a great job
or didn't fulfill like their task completely, sure,
you can't go on. And even or especially in companies as car manufacturing, it's very important to be very
precise,
because people drive with the cars, and it has to be
like safe, and
you can't have like you're not allowed to do faults, and so people are.
So like your point is like to actually like have a product at the end, people need to rely really on each other, and like even though each individual is fulfilling their task like for their own, they all need to like rely on each other, because without like these baby steps, or I don't know, like these little tasks, there wouldn't be like this complete product at the end. Or
for
absolutely.
Example, maybe a metaphor for that is you always have to look behind and also in front of you.
Yeah, that's true.
And you also have to focus on yourself. So it's always focusing on yourself, and
but also
don't let others behind, and also look forward.
So you don't have only like, of course, like looking for yourself is so important, looking for your own individual goals and purposes and destinies in life, but of course left and right, front and back. No, that's absolutely true. So thank you for your comments and examples, Vicky. I think that was a really nice debate. And as I said, please let us know your opinions and your views, like in the comments, or in the comment section, because we're actually really interested in that. And I think it's a really interesting theory of Durkheim. So after I presented to you the theory of the division of labor, I will now come to another important publication of Durkheim, namely Suicide, which he published in 1897. First of all, this work is so famous and crucial because Durkheim actually used statistical methods to prove its argument. So even though he didn't want to, and I think he kind of like saw it more negatively, he kind of relied on the positivism of Auguste Comte, and also tried to prove like a phenomenon like suicide, not with theological and psychological reasons, but with actual scientific facts and data. So he claimed that society often theorizes too generally, so Durkheim wanted to have an exact proof for the methodology he studied. Therefore, suicide was not only, or in his opinion, not only an isolated act of an individual, but also could be studied as a social fact. Durkheim defined suicide as any death which is the immediate or eventual result of a positive or negative act accomplished by the victim himself, when the victim knows that the death will be the result of his act, regardless of whether or not the death is his goal. And the text of Suicide offered an examination of how suicide rates at time differed, for example, across religions. So, for example, he said that, or he found a lower rate of suicide among Catholics than among Protestants, and he theorized that this was due to stronger forms of social control and cohesion among them than among Protestants or evangelical persons. So, based on his learnings from the statistical data, Durkheim argued that suicide can be or can not only be a result of psychological or emotional factors, but also of social factors as well, which I mean is like the key concept of sociology. And he reasoned that social integration in particular is one of the most, or the most important factor. So the more socially integrated a person is, that is, for example, the more he or she is connected to society, has like a feeling or possesses over a feeling of general belonging, in the sense that life makes sense within a specific social context, the less likely the person is to commit suicide. And of course, as social integration decreases, people are actually more likely to commit suicide. So Durkheim distinguished between 4 different types of suicide. First of all, we have the anomic suicide, which may, like the word, you may recognize the term from anomie, like which I presented earlier from the division of labor. So an anomic suicide happens within an extreme reaction or response by a person who experiences anomie. So it's like a disconnection from society, a feeling of not belonging, and the person kind of like needs to break free. Then we have like altruistic suicide. It's if you want to die for the benefit of a cause, for the society. For example, if you think of the hijackers of 9/11, because they actually died for a religious purpose. Then we have egoistic suicide. That happens when people feel detached from society, mostly like ordinary people like you and me, for example. And fatalistic suicide happens within conditions or as a consequence of extreme social regulation, because the person would rather die than continue enduring these oppressive conditions. For example, if you kill yourself as a prisoner because you don't want to live any longer in maybe like bad conditions, etc.
Yeah, so last but not least, we want to summarize and talk about Durkheim's impact and what he was criticized for. For example, he emphasized the distinction of sociology from other disciplines, and especially philosophy, and to compare his work from other important sociologists, for example, from Karl Marx and Max Weber. His influence has been questioned. For example, he had many misunderstandings toward. They had many misunderstandings towards Durkheim's work.
Yeah, and especially even though there were many misunderstandings and many people or society in general didn't quite get Durkheim's work, or often saw it really critical. Especially after the Second World War, Durkheim's work was an inspiration for post-war thinkers such as the French sociologist Michel Foucault. Especially his work for suicide, for example, Michel Foucault included in his work Discipline and Punishment. With the panopticum, so he actually like included the term anomie there. And yes, as we said, he had held the first own chair for sociology, so it was a milestone.
Yes.
Within the distinction between sociology and other important social sciences. And he actually influenced the term social fact so that human societies could be studied scientifically. So, yeah, of course, like now to come to an end, I think what you can see, like when it comes to Durkheim, is that because, as we talked before, like about his work, the division of social labor, which can actually be applied to our world nowadays, and which can be, of course, it has many critical sides, obviously, but there are still some very important features that can be recognized in our world nowadays. I think Durkheim's work really actually has an impact, and it was actually really interesting for me to study him, because, for example, I don't know, like if it's different in like French schools, but I, for example, only had Durkheim a little bit in school, but like only rarely, and the absolute bare minimum. So I think for me personally, it was really interesting to dive into his work and kind of like explore his theories. Or what was it like for you, Vicky?
Yeah, I had the same feeling, and what I read is that, for example, in this in the school in France, they talk more about Durkheim's
Okay, they
work.
do actually.
Yeah,
Okay,
so Durkheim's work still has a very big impact. Especially in France where he came from. So maybe it depends on which country you live.
Yeah.
So, for example, I remember Karl Marx and Max Weber.
Yeah, of course. But they're also like German sociologists.
Yes,
so we're in Germany. It's kind of obligate or mandatory not obligatory, mandatory to read about it. So
yeah, I totally agree with what you said, and it's very nice to see that a work that is so many years old can still be applied to our worlds nowadays.
Absolutely.
Because as we also talked about that, our world is changing so fast, and everything is very rapidly.
Yeah.
And now also the economy is not the economy, I meant environment is very changing and also challenging for us because we don't know what we are going to give to our children, and so
absolutely. And I think like Durkheim was actually also like really, or not brave, but like when it comes to his work Suicide, it's really fascinating how he took scientific proof, or he actually wanted to prove his work with data and statistic.
Yes.
Like as one of like the first persons, or in the field of sociology as one of the first persons, which is, if you think about that time, I mean, nowadays it's kind of crucial, or you would not ever, I don't know, have a book without scientific proof or without data, especially when it comes to phenomena like suicide. But like for him, he really studied it, and I think it's really interesting that it wasn't only like a theological or religious or psychological explanation, but also really with facts and scientific tools and methods. So yeah, he really laid a milestone in the field of sociology, and I think many more people should be interested in that.
Yeah. So we hope you liked our presentation and our discussion about Emil Durkheim's life.
Yeah, thank you for your attention. Please, let us know your opinion in the comments. What do you think about his work? What do you think about, of course, our presentation? You can give us some feedback. Yeah. Here are our sources.
Or if you have any further question,
feel free to ask. Absolutely.
Yeah. So thanks for listening.
Yeah, thank you for your attention, and see you hopefully the next time.
Bye.